What's going on, guys? Special request today from Smvt. Yeah, nailed it. He wanted us to build a Rabies Druid, and that's a build I've been interested in a very long time, just haven't really pulled the trigger on it. So this is a perfect opportunity to do just that. So I'm gonna go over the strategy, the build, and then give you an honest review of what I really think of the character and how it measures up in today's competitive PvP world. If you enjoy Diablo 2 PvP content, hit that subscribe button, find me on Twitch, and let's dive into this. We've really been on a poison kick these days. Recently on stream, we built and playtested a PvP Rabies Druid. If you're thinking about making one of these on Battle.net, watch this video first. I'm gonna start by talking about the strategy with this build, as it will kind of help you understand our item choices, the stats and skill trees, etc. The Rabies Druid is what I like to call the guerrilla build, because we do a lot of hitting and running. Good old chemical guerrilla warfare. Most of our kills in PvP rely on us just getting one hit in on our opponent. Unlike most poison builds, Rabies can actually kill your opponent when they're at 1 life. That's because Rabies happens in cycles. So every few seconds, Rabies will reapply itself until the aura, I guess you could call it that is surrounding your enemy is gone. This is great in PvP because it actually recalculates your poison damage during each Rabies cycle. It's also useful if your opponent is BMing and using antidote potions, for example. The cycle will actually just reapply the poison damage every few seconds. It'll just kind of pick up where it left off. So that's definitely a mechanic that we're going to try to take advantage of with this build. The other game mechanic that we try to take advantage of is desync. So we stack as much faster run walk as we can, and we just do an absolute ass load of weapon swapping. In case you didn't know, when you weapon swap in rapid succession, it actually desyncs your character, which can allow you to surprise your opponent by sneaking up on them. It can also allow you to escape and create the distance that you need for the poison to take effect. So that's the basic game plan. Just hit and run. Weapon swap glitch, hit, weapon swap glitch, run. And now that that's out of the way, I'm gonna briefly go over what we did for skills, stats, and then I'll show you the gear. And from there, I'm just gonna do an honest review of this character and how I really feel about it after dueling with this thing for about 2 weeks on end. So first, let's start up with the skills. Obviously, we're a Rabies Druid. We're gonna be dealing mostly all of our damage with Rabies. So we're gonna max Rabies and its synergy, Poison Creeper. Next, we're gonna max Werewolf. We're gonna spend a lot of time in Werewolf form, and this skill just increases your attack rating and attack speed. Both things are super important for this build, so we're gonna max that. Additionally, Lycanthropy improves the life that you have when you're in Werewolf form, and with our strategy, we need to be a tank. We need to be able to take a lot of hits and survive. The final skill that I maxed was Oak Sage. Again, it's super important to be a tank. After you deliver that first initial blow, you just need to survive long enough for the poison to do its thing. From there, you'll have probably about 4 or 5 skills, if you're like us at level 95, that you can sort of play around with. We put ours into Raven and Summon Spirit Wolf, just 1 point into those to sort of act as distractions for your opponents and to proc the dodge animations or avoid animations of Amazons. I put the rest of my points into Cyclone Armor. It's sort of a pain to recast it during the duel, but precasting it along with battle orders and such is a good way to just improve the amount of damage you can take throughout the duel. As a side note, a character on US East named Ruff is actually one of the best Rabies Druids I've personally ever seen. He stats the rest of his points into Fury. This can pay dividends if you've tagged your opponent with Rabies already and then they get overly aggressive trying to telestomp you to finish the duel before they die. This can allow you to do some more damage close up and not have to necessarily run away. Either approach is fine. So that's it for the skills. Let me just touch base on strength. You're gonna want to, obviously like most characters, put enough into strength to wear all of your items, but that changes depending on your setup versus different builds. A good rule of thumb is be able to wear Storm Shield, which is your heaviest item at 156 strength requirement, without the use of Jalal's Mane. When your strength checks out for that so that you can wear Storm Shield without the strength boost from Jalal's Mane, you should have enough strength. For dexterity, dexterity, you're gonna want just enough for max block as on most of our PvP builds, and the rest goes right into vitality. You might notice that there's not a lot of points left over after doing strength and dexterity to put into vitality. Don't worry, you're bound to have quite a bit of life when you're in werewolf form, even though you might have only put a little over 300 points worth of vitality into your build. So that means obviously we're gonna get a lot of life from our items. I just noticed my fat head was in front of my items. I apologize for that. But yes, we get a lot of life from our items and what's in our inventory. As you might expect for this build, the best grand charms to have are shape-shifting life skillers. Shout out to Artfully Done. He actually hooked us up and upgraded our life shape-shifting skillers on stream, and it was super cool. Dude, what? Yo, dude. What? Thanks to Artfully Done, we have an inventory full of those. The rest of the small charms in your inventory should have something to do with faster run walk. So most of mine I set up with attack rating and faster run walk, so it just gives us a better chance to hit our opponent. You could also do faster run walk and resistances, or even some AR life charms are okay, but you'll generally want to have faster run walk. You'll also notice I have a cube in my inventory. That is for cube bow. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically where you switch in the field from your main weapon to call to arms, and that allows you to do battle orders right there without having to go back to town. That's super important in this build because if you remember, we were talking about taking advantage of the mechanic that recalculates how much poison damage you do each cycle for rabies, and that's why on our switch we have this weapon right here. It's not a very fast attack speed weapon, but whenever rabies recalculates how much poison damage you're doing, this just gives you a huge boost to your minus enemy poison resistance. So that's why we have a Death's Web on the switch. On both shields for switch 1 and switch 2, we have a Storm Shield. If I wasn't so lazy, this would have a 5/5 poison facet in it. But both sides have Storm Shield in order to give us max block, regardless of what setup we end on when we're doing all of our weapon swapping. There are some other options for this. I'll get to that in a minute when we get to the stash. For the helm, we have Jalal's Mane. You have a few options here. Cerebus's Bite is what a lot of people talk about, because if it rolls +4 to shape-shifting skills, that can be equally as good as the skill bonus on Jalal's Mane. Cerebus's Bite also has a huge bonus to attack rating. However, I think giving up the 30% faster hit recovery along with the all resistances +30 is not necessarily the best choice. Jalal's Mane also gives you a 20% bonus to attack rating. All in all, I think Jalal's Mane is probably the best helm to use with this build. As our main weapon, we use Grief Phase Blade. Any Grief Phase Blade, even if you roll the absolute least amount of increased attack speed on it, will allow you to hit the 7-frame attack speed breakpoint. Also, the minus to enemy poison resistance from Grief, the hidden ability that not a lot of people remember that this weapon has, also pays some dividends here. Damage plus is obviously the most broken part about Grief and definitely comes into play when we tag our opponent with rabies. Our armor is Bramble. Most poison builds will use this. There's a huge boost to poison skill damage with this. Also, specifically for our druid build, it gives +50 faster hit recovery. We're aiming for ideally the 99% faster hit recovery breakpoint, and this is a huge boost for that. You'll see some people use the High Lord's Amulet. Don't make that mistake. We do not need the increased attack speed associated with that item if we're using Grief Phase Blade. So I'm just using a +2 druid amulet here with a bunch of other really useful stats. You're gonna absolutely need a Ravenfrost for this build for Cannot Be Frozen and plus the dexterity attack rating. There's just no other choice. You're gonna want that for one of your rings. Again, we are dealing most of our damage with rabies, so it's really important to pump that skill as much as we can. Therefore, Bull Cathos is the other ring that I use on this build. Along those same lines, Trangul's Gloves give us +25% poison skill damage, so a very good best in spot item for this build in my opinion. And our boots are Alder's Advance. The 50 to life and fire resist boosts are amazing, but also, most importantly, this has 40% faster run walk. It's super important to be able to run down our enemies in this build, catch them, and deliver that first hit with rabies. So we need to actually stack as much faster run walk as we can. Those are the basic items. Now let's take a look at the stash just to see what we can switch to depending on what matchup we're in. So if you're in the spot where you really need to run down your opponent even faster than you already do, such as if you're going against the Zon, you're probably going to want to switch to Enigma. The damage that is associated with Enigma versus Bramble is actually not as significant as you would think. In our build, when we use Bramble, we do 43,000 poison damage. When we switch to Enigma, it's 37,000 poison damage. That's a lot less of a hit to poison damage than I thought personally that we would take when we switched out the armors. So this is actually a very fine piece of armor to use right here, even if it's on your main, but especially when you're trying to run down characters and you need that extra faster run walk. If you're not concerned about block at all with the build that you're going up against, it's fair to switch to Tomb Reaver. You're gonna want to put 215 IAS jewels in this along with something else. If you're using an F Tomb Reaver, if you do use that, you could put a Zod and 215 IAS jewels in it. We chose to put 215 IAS jewels to hit the maximum 5-frame breakpoint, and also a faster hit recovery jewel into the item as well. Along the same lines, if you're not concerned about block, it is also fair to switch out the Storm Shield on your switch with a Spirit. That will allow you to do battle orders on the field and get a little bit more life. Also, you'll do more poison damage when you make the switch there as well. Those are the items in the stash that you'll probably switch out to the most. So that's it for our stats, our skills, and our build. Now, let's do an honest review of this character. I'm gonna let you know how I feel after playing it for 2 weeks and doing countless duels with him. I'm gonna let you know the good and the bad about this character. Let's start with the good. The first and arguably best thing that I gained from playing this character is learning how to weapon swap like a pro. Playing this build doesn't put too much focus on you having to do much else besides weapon swap and hit your opponent with Rabies. So if you're looking for a build that actually helps you learn how to weapon swap, try out the Rabies Druid. Trust me, you'll be a lot better at it by the time you're done practicing with this. It's also a really fun build. You can go around and get some real meme-worthy kills in some public games. I'd be lying if I didn't say there was some fun that came out of playing this character. The other good thing about it is this character is actually relatively cheap. Nothing on this character is really that expensive. I mean, you've seen it. The items here, I'm sure you've probably found most of them on your own, with maybe the exception of the shape-shifting Grand Charms that have a lot of life on them. Shape-shifting lifer Grand Charms are far less expensive than some of those tier 1 Grand Charms that you might see out there, such as like cold or fire lifers, or heaven forbid pally combat lifers. It's not nearly as expensive to get shape-shifting skillers as it is to get those Grand Charms. So those are the good things about the build, and now I want to talk about sort of the drawbacks to the build. I'm going to tell you this honestly, and I don't want you to get your hopes up. If you're playing a Rabies Druid, do not expect to win all of the duels that you engage in. I know that could easily be said about any Diablo 2 character, that there's some build that beats you out. I'll tell you straight up, there's a lot of them with the Rabies Druid. Whenever a player figures out what you're doing and figures out your strategy, the duels are going to get a lot easier for them. Which leads us to sort of the biggest drawback about the build, and that is that it is so linear. Some of the best builds that you see in D2 have some sort of way of switching up their attack strategy. There's really not much in the realm of creativity that you have with the Rabies Druid. Maybe if you get super creative, you can teleport by switching to human form, but you're still attacking with the same skill and basically trying to do the same thing. What you're gonna have trouble with is when players figure out what you're doing. If they have the ability to keep the distance from you and to hit you from afar, never letting you get close, it's gonna be a real bad night for you. You're not going to get kills on some of the most elite builds out there. As far as originality and fun factor goes for this build, I would give it a 6 out of 10. It can be fun at first, but like I said, I think your average player will get sick of it pretty quickly. As far as practicality and effectiveness in the dueling arena goes, I'd give it probably a 3 out of 10. Once people figure out your linear game plan, they're gonna adapt to it, and if they have any formidable character that they're bringing into the dueling arena, they're gonna be able to do that very easily. But that's where the challenge comes in. Are you able to work with this build enough to combat what your opponent's gonna do against you? That is where I think spending far more time with this character can really pay off. But where I think that falls off is the initial results of your duels may not inspire your typical player to do that. Overall, very fun build, very unique. If you're looking to change up your Diablo 2 experience and try something entirely new, you're definitely gonna be able to surprise some newer duelers with this build right here. That is my build video and honest review on the PvP Rabies Druid. I hope you enjoyed it. I wanna thank those of you who have subscribed to me on Twitch. I really appreciate the support. I look forward to seeing you guys there and also on the next YouTube video.